Good deal. So it's connecting, and then we are going to hit record in three, two. Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. I'm very excited about this guest because he has many books. We love people who put out multiple books because most likely they have some clarity and some real authority on a certain subject. And the individual that we're talking to today, Bill Cohen, goes by William Cohen on his books. Wrote a book called Power Failure: The Rise and Fall of an American Icon. Now, he is a financial journalist, has done many things, and we're going to get into that. So it is an honor to have you here, Bill Cohen.
Nice to be here, Mike. Thank you.
Well, let's start off with the genesis of this book. All right, you have, I believe, five or is it six somewhere in there? But what is
Seven, but who's counting?
seven? Seven. Okay, my
Yeah.
bad. Uh, so Power Failure: The Rise and Fall of an American Icon. What made you want to write this book? And then if you can kind of summarize your journey from the beginning to where you're at now.
Uh, right. So, I mean, basically, the reason I wanted to write this book is because, GE was once, our most respected company, most valuable company. It would be as if sort of Apple, Microsoft, and Google were all rolled up into one. It was a technological leader. It was a financial leader. It had made more money than any other company. It was the most valuable company in the world. It was a factory for creating management talent. Um, I had, when I got out of business school, I worked at GE Capital for 2 years, financing leveraged buyouts of all things. I had friends there, and I just wanted to know, try to figure out, as I've done in many of my books, why a company that was once the most valuable and most respected was now sort of an afterthought, and what had happened. How do you go from the top to the bottom, in like 15 years? That was sort of the problem I was hoping to solve, and I think we got to the bottom of it in the book.
Yeah, so I watched a show called the what is it? The Men Who Built America. Do you remember that show at all?
Oh yeah, I've seen that show when you click around the dial, at the end of the day.
And it kind of it I guess it basically talks a little bit about the genesis of it, right? Edison, and I think it was who was the guy was the main banker behind it. But if you can
JP
kind of give a
Morgan.
quick little rundown on even maybe the rise of it, what was the reason why there was such a spark and it just grew to this incredible company, and then maybe some of the things that led to the downfall. It makes me think of U.S. Steel because U.S. Steel was the biggest company in the world, and now it's obviously potentially being sold to Nippon Steel, or maybe it did or didn't. I don't know where it's at right now, but gone right after a certain amount of time.
Yeah, as with any origin story, there's a little bit of myth making. GE likes to say that it was Thomas Edison's company.
Yeah,
That's actually not completely true. It was a merger of two companies in 1892. One of them, Edison, General Electric, was Edison's one of the companies that Edison had started that, basically was one of the pioneers of electric power, electric energy, the electric current that, was used to, light offices and homes and buildings. And of course, it was, considered sort of risky, crazy technology, dangerous. There were, people would buy these electrical units, and there'd be fires, and so it's not quite as streamlined as it is today, and we take it for granted as we do today. So one of the companies was Edison's company, which he wasn't even running anymore. It was owned by J.P. Morgan and Henry Villard, who was another sort of industrialist who had owned a bunch of railroads, was a banker. He was actually the CEO of the company. So, and Edison was merely a shareholder. And basically, the New York bankers, J.P. Morgan and Henry Villard, decided that the company, which wasn't particularly well run at that point, should be merged with another company up in the Boston area that was run by a guy named Charles Coffin, uh, who whose family actually had owned a shoe business outside of Boston, and this Charles decided the shoe business was too boring, so he wanted to get into this electric power business himself. Bought a bankrupt uh, electric power business, sort of resurrected it, did a very good job running it, and then even though Edison objected mightily to the idea of merging his company, or his ownership stake in what was his company with Coffin's company, the bankers in both Boston and New York, decided that this was what was going to happen, and it did happen. And Edison was out shortly thereafter. Charles Coffin became the first CEO of what became General Electric Company in 1892. And then, one other interesting fact is there was a financial crisis in 1893. And at that time, the new General Electric Company had like 10 million of debt. But that was too much debt at the time. And the company almost went bankrupt a year after it was formed, and would have gone bankrupt but for the decision by J.P. Morgan, which the man, which was delayed because he was at his vacation home in Maine, to basically allow the company to be recapitalized. And after that near miss, Charles Coffin decided that GE should have sort of a a fortress kind of balance sheet, and not take the kinds of risks that they had been taking in their first year. And that's basically what GE was, kind of a fortress balance sheet and a fortress of a company until around the beginning of the 21st century after 9/11, when things began to deteriorate.
Well, JP Morgan, the more I learn about history, the more I realize, man, that guy really changed a lot. It's amazing how much he has his hands involved in everything, and that right around the early 1900s. So pretty
Yeah,
powerful.
very true. And the company that is JP Morgan Chase today is also now, once again, our largest and probably most powerful and profitable bank. So, uh,
Wow.
which wasn't always the case, by the way. It's had its ups and downs, and only became the powerhouse it is today after Jamie Dimon became the CEO in around 2005.
So the rise, though, like you said, I think it was a power player for many years. I mean, I've read stories about it in the 70s and 80s. There were many leaders that helped General Electric stay afloat. Do you have any interesting stories of those people?
No, there, each leader at GE was, you know, in many ways perfect for his time. At the time that he was the leader. It's obviously been all men.
Jack Welch is the one that I think of.
Well, of course, everybody thinks of Jack Welch, and he was, and I uh, obviously knew of Jack when I worked there from 1987 to 89. He didn't know me, of course. I was many layers below, but I did get to interview him many times before his death in March of 2020. And what he told me is in the book. He, of course, took over the company in 1981. It had about a $12 billion market value at that time, which was not nothing, but and he ran the company for the next 20 years and increased the market value to more than 600 billion, making it the most valuable company in the world. Now, by the way, GE is probably is it splitting itself up into three parts and is no longer anything like what it was. It probably has a market value of the parts, something like 200 billion. So it's still not even remotely close to what it once was. Uh, but Jack was, a phenomenally energetic guy. He nurtured his team. He could be hard on them, but he also encouraged, he managed to bring out the best in people in terms of financial performance, pushed them really hard, made some of the best, acquisitions in American history, and, ran the place phenomenally well, had both the media and the Wall Street research analysts eating out of the palm of his hands. And, that was a very formidable method for success, formula for success in the period, when Jack was running the company from the early 80s to, 9/11.
What do you think made him so great? I mean, there's probably many aspects, but I thought his ability to communicate was very was extremely uh inspiring, right? So he can articulate his vision and his solutions very well. Did you catch that whenever you interviewed him, or is there anything else
Oh,
that
sure. I
stood
mean, obviously
upon?
he was a much older man when I interviewed him, but he still had that sort of twinkle in his eye. He still had that energy. He was still, fiercely sort of fighting for uh, how his legacy would be, written and interpreted. It was really sort of hard to argue with his success. I know there's been a lot of kind of revisionist history about Jack and GE since he died, but I think, objectively speaking, you have to give the guy credit. I mean, anybody who takes a company from 12 billion in market value to 650 billion in market value, really, deserves the recognition that he's gotten. He was a guy who, again, he was very hard on people, but he also uh, tolerated dissent. He would listen to people whose views he didn't agree with, who disagreed with him. He was willing to change his mind after he'd made decisions. And I think as I said, he was able to inspire the people who worked for him to give him, 150%. He really was like a coach of a basketball team or a football team or any professional team who managed to get more out of his athletes than they thought was possible.
Hmm. And so, to kind of, I want to get to your other books because you have so many here, and the one that really caught my eye was Four Friends. I want to get into that for a brief moment. But what was the decline? Um, what caused the decline? Was it leadership? Was it just technology? Was it competition, or maybe just stagnation? There was a comfort level built, and the culture was there, and they didn't want to innovate anymore. So, what was the main uh, spark that caused the
Well,
decline?
obviously, leadership is the key to any company's performance, and the selection of the leader makes a huge difference. The first thing out of Jack's mouth when I first sat down to interview with him is that he had screwed up. He used a more colorful language. He had screwed up his own succession process. And you're too young to remember, but it was a very elaborate succession process. There were three guys who were, singled out. The succession story was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, day after day, week after week. It was a very high profile, succeeding Jack Welch. I mean, that's what corporate America was all focused on at that time. Yeah, and he was the first to admit that he'd screwed it up by choosing Jeff Immelt. And I think, Jeff, was a very capable guy, great resume, looked like a CEO. His father had worked in the jet engine business in Cincinnati for many years, so he's sort of like a GE blue blood, Dartmouth, the Harvard Business School. But he took over as CEO of GE. His first day on the job was September 10th, 2001.
Oh my
The next
God.
day was September 11th, right? So, GE had made the jet engines on the planes. GE owned NBC at that time, which of course was broadcasting the tragedy, advertising free for weeks. And GE had also reinsured a couple of the buildings down at Ground Zero that got wiped out in the attack. So there were a lot of problems and that emerged immediately for Jeff to grapple with. And there was also the past, after WorldCom and Enron and other corporate scandals, what was created was the Sarbanes-Oxley law, which changed the requirements for disclosure and corporate accountability. And so pretty much instantly, Jeff had a whole new world he was dealing with, which, many CEOs did. And then, unfortunately, I think if you look at it objectively, Jeff definitely made some mistakes from the outset and sort of compounded them over time. And, I will just sort of repeat what Dave Calhoun told me. Dave Calhoun was a longtime GE executive who uh, recently is the CEO of Boeing and has just announced his resignation from Boeing. But what he told me once, when I interviewed him for the book, was that essentially when Jack had a big decision to make, he made the right ones, and when Jeff had a big decision to make, he made the wrong ones. And that's a little harsh, I know, but I think in fact it's really quite accurate. And I think that explains in large part. I mean, I could go through decision after decision, but we don't have enough time. But essentially, when Jeff had big decisions to make, he made the wrong ones, and it came to the point where in 2015 it was time for him to go after 14 years.
Wow. Yeah, so the market share, I'd love to look at the stats. You probably have it in your book, but just to see the decline in the market share, right? You have competition, whether it's, I guess, Westinghouse or whoever gets involved, and competition from overseas probably just starts to take up the market share and steady
Well,
decline.
and that and wrong decisions and getting out of various businesses, and for prices below what he should have got for them, and earnings disappearing and no way to replace those earnings. So
Hmm.
the investors just took the company down essentially.
So in your book, Four Friends,
Hmm.
I have not heard of three of these guys, but I'm fascinated with one of them specifically. Jack Berman, Will Daniel, Harry Bull, and obviously John F. Kennedy. We all know him. So were these
Senior.
individuals, tell us a little bit about the premise of this book. Do their lives intersect? And so you talk about four friends, promising lives cut short, and maybe the genesis of this, but also maybe a story of Harry Bull. Sounds like there's something interesting there.
So this is sort of an idea for a book that I've been carrying around with me for a while, even before I went back to writing after my career in banking. Was that uh, four of my friends from high school, and I was fortunate enough to go to Andover, a private school in Massachusetts. And four of my friends from there, as you just mentioned, them, they all died young and tragically. So in their 30s, in the 1990s, and I thought it was important and a worthwhile venture to remember them and honor their memories by telling their stories because, I only knew them all for, a few short years in high school. This was in the, pre-internet era, the pre-cell phone era. Uh, you know, so I knew uh, John F. Kennedy Jr., for the 2 years, that he was at Andover, and, I'd run into him after that in New York City. But by and large, I obviously everybody knew who JFK Jr. was, but I didn't really know the stories of his growing up or what he did afterwards. I mean, again, we kind of all knew superficially,
He would have
but
been president. There's no doubt,
I
right?
think I think it's fair to say he would have been president. I mean, he might have in fact run for president against Donald Trump in 2016 had he lived.
Or he would have been his VP or Trump for him. I think they were great friends.
No, 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 they
No?
were not great friends.
Oh,
They
okay. I
they would
thought they
never
were.
have been political allies. There's just absolutely. I mean, Kennedy is from a Democratic family in
Trump was a
Massachusetts.
major Democrat in '90s, though, wasn't he?
I don't know if he's major. He played at being a Democrat. He played at being an independent, and now he's what MAGA Republican or whatever he is. There's no way they would have been on the same ticket, despite the crazies thinking that he's still alive and is going to be Trump's vice president this time because he's still alive. Uh,
I've
he's
heard that
definitely
before.
not still alive. They definitely would not have been political allies. And in fact, I think JFK Jr., for the reasons I say in the book, very much might have been the Democratic nominee for president in 2016 instead of Hillary Clinton, and would have defeated Donald Trump, I think, rather easily. But oh, that's pure speculation.
Well, I
Um,
think that I remember he was going against Hillary Clinton, and there's all kinds of stories out there. You want to talk about conspiracies? If it wasn't for him dying, he would have actually been what was it? Not Secretary of State, but whatever she won. And so that's an interesting storyline also. But anyway, I digress.
well, he was just to finish this thought. He was thinking very seriously about running for senator from New York in 2000. But he decided, he was good friends with the Clintons and Bill Clinton in particular. And he decided, after Hillary moved back to New York, after Bill left office, and she decided to run for senator, he decided to defer to her as I think, a gesture of friendship and courtesy. And she was obviously older than he was, and he had more time, so he thought. So he deferred to her, and she ran and won that seat. Then he thought that he might actually run for governor of New York. I think he fancied himself as some sort of, more of an executive. He was the head of George Magazine at that time. It wasn't doing particularly well financially, but it made a big, stink in the media. And I think he was thinking of running for a governor of New York. And of course, had he been, elected governor of New York in 2002, you know, probably by, 2000, 14 or whatever, he would have been ready to think about running for president. So I don't think that's crazy, but obviously, as we're, coming upon the, uh, you know, 25th, anniversary of his death, obviously that didn't happen.
Yeah, truly amazing though. They never even found his body. It's crazy. So, Harry Bull, though, just to kind of touch on his life. What happened here? It says in the summary, Harry builds the life of a careful, successful Chicago lawyer and heir to his family's fortune before taking an inexplicable and devastating risk on a beautiful summer day. What's that about?
Well, again, all of these four stories are quite tragic. They weren't health related. They were an example of somebody going out, living their lives like they have almost every other day, and tragedy befalling them. Uh, the Harry's story is probably the most tragic of all, if that's possible, to parse them that way. Um, he had was a successful a lawyer at a law firm in Chicago. His family owned a paper company. His father had run it, and his father had asked him after he became partner uh, at the Chicago law firm to come back to the company and be on a track to run it. He agreed to do that. So he was working at the paper company on the outskirts of Chicago. It was the weekend. He had a small sailboat that the family had on Lake Michigan. Used to go out, all the time, even when he was a kid. He wasn't like a great sailor, but he was a good enough sailor. And he went out with his two daughters. He had three kids, a younger son. So the three of them went out a beautiful summer August day, and they, for whatever reason, jumped off the boat, went swimming in Lake Michigan without life preservers on, and Lake Michigan is very, very deep. Can't really anchor the boat, so they didn't anchor the boat. They couldn't anchor the boat, and the boat sort of drifted away from them while they were out swimming, and all three of them died.
Jeez. Man, just like
And
any other time. No, it was nothing, no crazy weather or anything.
no, it was a beautiful sunny August afternoon,
And so
and
they all knew each other from, did you say Andover? Is that right?
yes, we all knew each other from Andover. Yes,
Wow, incredible. So what year was that then that happened?
96.
Wow. So all within the same window. You're saying all within the 90s.
Yeah, they all
Jeez.
died in the 1990s.
Wow. Man, you have
So I've
multiple.
sort of held on to their stories, for 20 years, and was trying to. Oh, excuse me, that they died in 1999, and I've sort of held on to their. I mean, JFK Jr. and Harry Bull died in 1999 within a month of each other, and uh, I sort of held on to their stories, for 20 plus years. And, to write that book, I had to, interview all the people who knew them. I had to interview Harry Bull's widow. You can imagine what that was like, as well as another Jack Berman's widow, Will Daniels' girlfriends. I mean, it was, it was quite it was quite a reporting challenge, and I thank them all for being willing to talk to me and share with me those stories.
Wow. And so you have an interesting background. You were an investment banker and you used your journalist degree. So how did you become an investment banker with a journalist background? And then I guess did you just go back to your passion? Was that really your true drive in life? And that's how you said, all right, let's get out of investment banking and let's get into telling stories on historical figures.
Yeah, I mean, I was drawn to journalism, you know, sort of early on. Hadn't done any writing. I was the business manager of the paper at Andover. Um, And then I went to Duke, where I majored in history and was editor of a magazine at Duke called Tobacco Road. And that was sort of my first taste of writing, actually. After Duke, I decided I wanted to be a journalist. Eventually made my way to Columbia Journalism School, and then was a newspaper reporter in Raleigh, North Carolina for 2 years. And for long and boring reasons, I decided to go back and get my MBA, which I did at Columbia. Still wanted to be a journalist, but it was 1987. For whatever reason, I couldn't get a job in journalism that I wanted. All you had to do to get a job on Wall Street in May of 1987 was breathe. Uh, so I could do that. And, I got, at Columbia, they came, all the firms came up and recruited people. So, it was great. You didn't even have to do anything. You just had to make it through the interview process. And that's how I got the job at GE Capital, financing leverage buyouts. From there, I went to Lazard, then Merrill Lynch, then JP Morgan Chase. And then in 2004, I found myself on the wrong side of the JP Morgan Chase politics after 9/11. This was before Jamie Dimon got there, and it was not doing well at all. And I got fired, for no reason by my colleagues who decided that I was the one who had to go, along with many others, because I wasn't in the room where the decisions were being made. And when that happens, you you're the one that gets shot. Um, so always remember to be in the room when those decisions are being made.
Great advice.
Um, so I figured, what can I do now? In addition to firing me, my former colleagues make sure that I was blackballed, so I couldn't get a job on Wall Street. They made sure of that, and so I thought to myself, what can I do? Uh, I know how to write. I know how to be a journalist. I know how to report. Uh, I've thought about writing a book before. I'll write a book about, how about I came up with the idea of writing a book about Lazard, where I had worked, 10 years earlier. And I thought it was, such an interesting place. And there had only been one book written about it by Carey Reich many years earlier. And I thought, this place is, it's an incredible story that's never really been fully written. And I wrote a book proposal and got an agent and sold the book proposal to Doubleday, and the rest is history. It was a bestseller. It was named the best business book of the year in 2007 by the Financial Times. And, you know, my journalistic career exploded. I was asked to write op-eds for the New York Times and asked by Graydon Carter to write for Vanity Fair, where I became a special correspondent for, 13 years. And then, I've written 6 other books. I'm now a co-founder of Puck, which is a new digital media company. And so
It's almost,
basically
you
being
got to be better.
fired from
Yeah, it's the best
Wall
thing that
Street
ever happened to you,
was
huh?
the best thing that ever happened to me. And I've thought of dedicating one of my books to my colleagues who fired me as thanks for them doing that. But it's either a choice between thanking them or thanking my family, and I always opt to thank my family instead of thanking my former colleagues who had nothing better to do with their lives than figure out how they could fire me.
Wow, it's crazy though. It was a new identity, and it was actually the real identity because that's where you started, right? And it seems like maybe you took a different path and then life had other plans for you. So it worked out. And guys, just to look at his bio, it's pretty damn impressive. And he was talking about how The Last Tycoons is the secret history of Lazard. I don't know how to say
Prayer,
Freres. Freres, yeah.
prayer,
And it was the winner
brothers.
of the 2007 FT Goldman Sachs Business Book of the Year. And then his 2014 book, The Price of Silence, and the Duke Lacrosse scandal was also a New York Times bestseller. So that is awesome. And you have appeared on I mean, in addition to Million Dollar Stories podcast, the News Hour, right? Charlie Rose Show, the Travis Smiley Show, CBS This Morning, and a couple other ones. Fascinating. So, you get to interview people, I would assume, on a frequent basis. Is there anybody that stands out in your life that really impressed you? We just had a guy on our podcast that interviewed Steve Jobs, and he told a quick little story about it. Is there anything like that that stands out that's worth sharing?
I mean, I've interviewed, my first story for Vanity Fair back in, 2009 was about Larry Summers, who was then Obama's National Economic Advisor. He had been Treasury Secretary. He had been president of Harvard. He'd been like the greatest economist under 40. Um, Larry is, he's become controversial from time to time, but just a brilliant mind. I mean, he kind of leaves you spellbound. Uh, but I mean, I've interviewed so many different people at this point, but you know, I think one of my favorite people, and I get asked this, and I've said this before, one of my most favorite people who I've interviewed for my book about Goldman Sachs, which is called Money and Power, How Goldman Sachs Came to Rule the World, was Hank Paulson, who was the CEO of Goldman, and then he became the Treasury Secretary in the second George W. Bush administration. He was Treasury Secretary during the 2008 financial crisis. Probably, along with, uh, you know, Ben Bernanke and Tim Geithner, probably saved our country from, further financial catastrophe and a Great Depression number two. I mean, not only does Hank Paulson look like the Treasury Secretary out of Central Casting, but he's the most. I find him to be like the most honorable, and he's a Republican, and I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, but he's the most honorable, uh, forthright, respectful. I mean, I just have such great admiration for that guy.
Wow.
I'm sure he could be tough, and you have to be tough to get to the top of Goldman Sachs. But I think he was a really good banker. I can see why. He was a really great Treasury Secretary. I think people in Washington still respect him highly and seek his advice and wisdom and counsel on a regular basis, even regardless of the party of the people in power. Um, I got a lot of time for Hank Paulson.
Wow. Hank Paulson. Don't know much about him. I'll look him up. And outside of your own books, is there one that you recommend to our audience? Something that maybe put you on this path, made you fall in love with, whether it's history or writing, anything that stands out in your life? I always talk about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It changed my life. So anything like that for you?
Oh, I mean, there are writers who I really enjoy you know reading. I think in many ways, a guy like Ken Auletta, who wrote Greed and Glory on Wall Street about Lehman Brothers, and has written other great books. I mean, Ken is a dear friend of mine, and I love spending time with him. And he wrote books and writes books, the way I try to write them too, and try to emulate his writing story. To me, it's all about the characters and the narrative, and um, these are not, and the analysis sort of flows subtly, and the implications of what the stories I'm telling sort of come cumulatively as you read more and more into the books. I don't hit you over the head with any analysis or conclusions. I let the reader enjoy the story, enjoy the characters, and reach his or her own conclusions. And those are the kinds of books I like to read. Sort of like Walter Isaacson's book, on Elon Musk, or Michael Lewis's books, Brian Burroughs' book, Barbarians at the Gate. I mean, these are wonderful books about, I mean, I find that, and I've written, books, as you mentioned, about my friends and about the Duke lacrosse scandal. I mean, so I've written books about other things than business, but I find that the stories of how people get to the top of these organizations, what they do when they're there, and what happens to them inevitably when they screw up is just too delicious to not explore in a book length treatment.
Man, seems like you have fallen in love with just writing in general, very therapeutic, but also gives you so much clarity. And I preach to our audience to write a book. The book you read will change your life. The book you write will change your legacy. And writing, do you recommend it to everybody just to have some type of awareness or identity or just clarity of where you come from, where you're at now, where you're going, and how much do how much do you champion the aspect of just being a writer to people?
Well, I mean, I love being a writer. I certainly love being a writer more than I love being a banker. I used to say about banking, it was good one day a year when you got your bonus. Writing is hard though. I mean, you can't, I don't have anybody who works for me. I don't have any research people. I don't have any assistants. I don't have any interns. I do all my own interviewing, all my own reporting, all my own writing, and it's hard. You got to put your butt in the seat every day and do it. And you know, the old Chinese proverb, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." That's what it's like writing a book. I mean, you just have to do it day after day after day, and then somehow you it ends at one point. It just ends, and you can't believe that you've done it. And even when the books are published, I can't believe that I did it. I don't know when I wrote these books or how or when, and it's not because my memory isn't there, although it's not quite what it used to be. You just sort of forget what it's like to plod along every day doing this, doing a little bit every day, and at some point, you get there, just like the journey, one step in front of the other every single day. And it's incredibly satisfying, when you're done and when it's published. I love having my own equity. I love books give me my own equity. I share it with my publisher. We're partners together. One of the reasons I left Vanity Fair for Puck is because the writers all have equity in the business. That was very important to all of us who started this. And if if you work as a journalist for the New York Times, that may be very satisfying, but you don't have any equity. That's owned by the Sulzberger family. I really believe in equity, and writers should have equity, content creators should have equity. I'm a champion of that. I've been trying to achieve that ever since I was a journalist in Raleigh. Of course, it wasn't available to me then. As a banker, it was available, but when my good friends at JP Morgan Chase fired me in 2004, they took my equity from me, my unvested options, and my unvested restricted stock. They took it from me because they fired me. And I had no control over that. And I didn't want to have no control anymore. I didn't want to have not have I didn't want to have a boss who could fire me. I don't have a boss now who can fire me. I can write, you know, there's nobody who's going to fire me as I write these books. And I'm a partner at Puck. Hopefully, the partnership doesn't decide to get rid of me. I hope not, but um, that was one thing I was really determined to change about my life in 2004.
I like that. Yeah. As a writer, you have your control of your life, but also the freedom to write whatever you want and use it however you want. I'm with you on that. Well, Bill, I don't want to take too much of your time. It's an honor to talk with you. Guys, the book that we're talking about today, more so than anything else, is Power Failure, The Rise and Fall of an American Icon, which is all about GE. He has many books. Look him up, easy to find. Outside of Amazon, is there a website or a social media channel that you recommend for people to look you up on?
I do have a website, williamcohan.com. I am on X, that heinous social media platform. I like to call it Twix. trying to get Twix to
That's
work,
much
Mike.
better, I
So
think. Yeah.
if you could help, everybody likes Twix. Trying to get that to happen, but it's not easy. So I'm also there, although I find it just horrible. But that's it on the social media front. Not big on social media, but I do have my website, and that'll tell anybody who wants to get in touch with me can do it either on Twix or through my website.
That's brilliant, by the way. Great marketing. That would work. Send me a Twix or send me a Tweaks. It's
Yeah,
good.
right. Much better
Rather
than
than an
send me
X.
an
Yeah.
X. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I mean, Elon, you're a genius. I think you're changing the world. The name, though, is a little iffy, just so you know, Elon.
His marketing sucks. He's terrible at marketing.
He is the wealthiest guy, they say, that ever lived. Who knows? But anyways, man, it's been an honor to talk with you. I appreciate your time. Guys, check out his books. Remember, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life. Right on.